Howdy again everyone. I love 35mm lenses on a full frame camera, and I also love lenses with extra bright maximum apertures, so today I'm about as excited as a mosquito at a nudist beach to present you with the Laowa Argus 35mm f/0.95, the brightest full frame 35mm lens ever made, its nearest competitor being only as bright as f1.2. This lens's images are a dream come true for me. They can get the fantastic background separation of a bright 50mm lens, but combined with the useful wideness of 35mm, so this lens in particular can get you some truly gorgeous, not to mention unique, looking images, and testing it out was a blast for me. It is a manual focus only lens, and it's only for mirrorless cameras, coming in Sony E, Nikon Z and Canon RF mount flavours, and this particular copy is for Sony. Its price is $900 US, not unreasonable for a lens that's a bit of a trailblazer. I'd like to thank Venus Optics for loaning me this lens for a few weeks for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. Not only does an aperture of f/0.95 give you incredibly out of focus backgrounds, but it lets in much more light to your camera's sensor, enabling fast shutter speeds even in darker situations. Let's put that to the test for a minute. On the left is an image from the Laowa lens at f/0.95, and on the right, one from the Sigma 40mm f1.4 Art, which has recently become my new workhorse lens for video work. Okay, it's not a perfect comparison because the shot from the Sigma lens is a little tighter, but despite that, the Laowa lens is still clearly giving out more out of focus backgrounds. Its shutter speed is just under twice as fast, so we can see that its light transmission is coming up to about twice as bright as an f1.4 lens, almost. You might hope for a touch more brightness than that, but actually it's pretty typical for an f/0.95 lens to have a little light transmission loss here and there at the brightest apertures. Well, let's look at the lens's build quality first. As usual for Venus Optics lens, this one looks gorgeous, and its metallic fit and finish feel very high quality. It's based on a metal lens mount with no electronics at all and no weather sealing. Then comes an aperture ring, which can be set to operate with gentle clicks or completely smoothly. Then comes the metallic focus ring, which turns with a very long throw of about 280 degrees, so precisely manually focusing at f/0.95 is not too difficult. Well, unless your subject is moving around, that is. As you can see here, the lens does suffer from some focus breathing as you slowly turn that focus ring around. The lens's filter size is 72mm wide, and it comes with a very narrow but good looking metallic lens hood. It weighs about 750 grams, so it's definitely on the heavy side, but not burdensome. Overall, top marks for build quality here, although obviously focusing manually at f/0.95 will take a little practice and even patience sometimes. Let's take a look at image quality now. I'm testing it today on a Sony a7R III with its 42 megapixel sensor. As it's a fully manual lens, no in-camera corrections are available here. At f/0.95, we are off to an encouraging start in many ways, with good sharpness and good contrast in the middle of the image. The most notable problem here is purple fringing on contrasting edges. Over in the corners, image quality is, unsurprisingly, quite soft, although you can still make out what's going on. I've seen worse than this. At f1.2, we see a minuscule improvement in brightness and sharpness in the corners, but back in the middle, picture quality is fantastic now, except for a little remaining purple fringing on contrasting edges. Stop down to f1.4 for that to go away, leaving behind excellent image quality. Back in the corners, the image is beginning to take shape a little more now as well. At f2 we see a great improvement, leaving us with good sharpness and contrast, although a little colour fringing is still visible. f2.8, f4 and f5.6 see further but very tiny improvements. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, although that colour fringing is still hanging around. Overall though, I was quite pleasantly surprised by the lens's image quality. Its main weakness is colour fringing on contrasting edges. However, even at f0.95 we get some very good sharpness and contrast in the middle of the picture, and the corners are pretty sharp from f2 or so. So for a lens of these extreme parameters and at this kind of price point, it's difficult to ask for much more than that, really. Let's take a look now at vignetting and distortion. The lens projects very little distortion, although some pincushion warping can be seen right in the edges. At f0.95, the image corners are, unsurprisingly, very dark. They are about as dark at f1.4, but at f2 they do begin to brighten up, and at f4 we see fairly even illumination. Now let's take a look at close-up image quality. The lens can focus down to 50 centimeters, not very close really. At f0.95 we are still capturing some detail, but contrast has bottomed out pretty badly here. However, stop down to f1.4 for a considerable improvement, and at f2 we are back to enjoying some fantastic image quality again. Now let's see how well the lens performs against bright lights. What a mess. Any and every kind of flare imaginable makes its presence known here. Stop down to f2 and it's reduced, but still not good. And while we're working in the dark, let's look at chroma levels. At f0.95, chroma smearing is, as I expected, very strong in the image corners, as you can see. Here's f1.4 and f2. At f2.8, it's finally pretty much gone. Let's zoom out and take a look for sunstars now. This is a pretty sunstar-free lens, unfortunately. Even at f11 and f16, it's really hard to catch them there. Now, let's take a look at the quality of this lens's bokeh. For some people, this will be the make or break moment of the whole review. Like with other extremely bright aperture lenses, we are treated to some interesting, but not offensive results here. Deeply, and even not so deeply, out of focus backgrounds do look beautiful and soft. Transitional areas can sometimes get a bit edgy though, and we're also treated to the usual cat's eye shaped bokeh in the image corners at f0.95. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. At f0.95, the close-up image quality is a bit too poor to really see any of it here. Stop down to f1.4 and f2 though, and you can see that it's not really a problem, which is a bit of a surprise on a lens with parameters like this. Overall, well, I had no idea what kind of test results to expect with this one, but I was actually quite pleased with the Laowa 35mm f0.95 in many ways. It suffers from some of the usual issues of an extremely bright lens, most notably vignetting, poor close-up image quality, flaring, and soft image corners at the brightest apertures. But apart from that, it can yield some pretty convincing results actually, especially with its good sharpness and contrast in the middle of the image straight from f0.95, and its slightly unusual but not unattractive bokeh. Ultimately, if you want a perfect f0.95 lens, then you have to pay $8,000 for a Nikon 58mm Noct. If you're happy with getting a really fun one though, which can bag you some beautiful and unique results, then this 35mm f0.95 is right up your street, and if you're happy to work around some of its optical issues, then it does come recommended. I want to say a huge thanks to all my supporters over on Patreon for their generosity in keeping these review videos trucking on. If you'd like to support the channel and get some exclusive bonus content, including exclusive bonus videos once a month, then check it out in the description below. Hwyl fawr pawb, so long everyone.